10 now, so we're going to get started. Okay, so
Cool.
let's get started. Welcome everyone to Nova's third workshop in the Skills to Success series. Today's workshop is with Fuad Ali. He's going to be talking about goal setting, how to set better goals, and build successful projects. So we're going to start by introducing our team. So my name is Sachi. I just finished my first year studying health sciences at McMaster, and I'm going to introduce Chelsea and Imtisal now.
Yeah, hi guys, my name is Chelsea. I just finished my first year in mechatronics engineering at Waterloo, and I'm going to pass it over to Imtisal.
Yeah, I'm Imtisal. We also forgot to mention that we all founded Nova, but I guess that's pretty straightforward. I just finished my first year at Harvard studying biomedical engineering, and Sachi can take over with housekeeping now.
So again, welcome everybody. We're excited to have you here. So we're just going to get started with just some basic instructions for the presentation, just to ensure that it goes as smoothly as possible. So please keep your video on mute if you're not speaking. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat function, or we can go through them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this whole presentation just to make sure that if people weren't able to attend, or if you guys do want to look at this for reference in the future, we'll be sending it to everybody who signs up. So we mentioned that in the email, but yes, we will be recording this entire presentation. So we've been using this chat function as well to get to kind of know you guys a bit better. So just keep using that chat function if you have more questions during the presentation. I'm going to let Imtisal introduce our organization now.
Yeah, so Nova is an organization that originated from our high school STEM council in 2017. And so officially, this is our third year as an organization. We're planning to launch an internship program this summer, and we wanted to kick it off by having these virtual workshops to introduce everyone to our brand. We also have more exciting things coming soon, like a literary journal launch, so be sure to check out our social media handles. Some of you probably found out about this through social media, but just in case, they are at Nova X Network on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And the Nova X Network has organized a series of workshops titled Skills to Success, as mentioned, to help our participants build and strengthen soft skills, like communication, leadership, work ethic, problem solving. Because as a team, we want to encourage ethical literacy and well-roundedness in all of our members. And that is basically why we set up these workshops for you guys.
And as you guys probably know, today's workshop is on goal setting and project building with Fuad. Fuad is a software engineer at Twitter and a former software engineer at Tesla. He's a fourth-year electrical and biomedical engineer at McMaster, and he also is a co-host in the Into the Adult First podcast. So I'm gonna toss it over to Fuad now.
I will stop sharing.
Yeah, for sure. Let me just start presenting my screen. Cool. Can everyone see my screen? Cool. Awesome. Hi, everybody. It's kind of weird doing this with nobody behind the camera because I don't know, I get no feedback from my voice. But anyways, my name is Fuad. Thanks for the introduction, guys. I'm really, really excited to have this workshop here today with you guys. Today we'll be talking about goal setting, how to set better goals and build successful projects. Here's a little overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll be giving you guys, this is the introduction. And I'll be giving you guys a little bit of a background on myself. Then we're going to go to what is goal setting, why is it important. We're going to start starting with why, which is just a framework for, figuring out why you want to do what you want to do and really starting all your goals from there. What makes for a good goal and some frameworks for, making good goals, as well as some examples. Then we're going to talk about short versus long-term goals and how those are sort of different and what kind of ways you can think about those. And then we'll be getting to translating goals into your projects. So as somebody in tech, projects usually means building an app or something like that. But I'll talk about some other projects as well. For example, my podcast or, even a research project or something like that. And then finally, we'll hopefully have a lot of time for Q&A. I don't have anything booked after this. So we'll try and get through all your questions. So let's get started. So first off, a little bit about me. I'm from Toronto. I was actually born in the U.S. and then moved to Toronto when I was 10. But I like to say that I'm from Toronto like since the beginning, just because most of my conscious life has been there. So yeah, anyone from Toronto represent. I am currently in my internship year, but I'm going into my senior year or fourth year at McMaster studying electrical and biomedical engineering. It's kind of a double program. It's pretty cool. Would recommend checking it out if you're interested in applying to Canadian universities. And I've done quite a few internships. This is officially my 7th internship here at Twitter. Basically, I started off like kind of more interested in like the medical world and especially biomed. And so my first internship was at Toronto General Hospital. And there I got put on like a lot of really cool coding projects as well. And that sort of like opened my eyes to the world of tech. It was mostly like a machine learning algorithm to help predict liver disease. And I really didn't know how to code before that, but it was kind of just like a trial by fire. And then that's how I kind of got into the world of tech. So I did internships at Wealthsimple, which is, for all you Americans out there, it's kind of like Robinhood. It's a commission-free trading platform. And there's also an app. It's pretty big in the Toronto startup scene. And then there's obviously Tesla, which I did last term in California, and then Twitter, where I am currently also in California. And then I did an internship with the CIA, but unfortunately I can't really talk about that. So yeah. And then hobbies. I used to be really into rugby. Unfortunately, I got concussed really bad. I got concussed really bad a couple years back, and so I've stopped playing. In the meantime, I picked up running a lot as sort of a way to stay active, and I love reading and writing as well. So if any of you guys have book suggestions, please put them in the chat. Continuing on, getting a little bit more into kind of the meat of our workshop. First off, at the bottom, we have like kind of like an agenda too. So if you ever get lost in where we're at, hopefully that helps out. But anyways, getting to the meat of the workshop. First off, what is goal setting, and why do we even want to have this kind of like why do we even need a workshop on goal setting? Isn't it something that everybody kind of just does personally? Well, I think goal setting is a pretty large topic, and it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but at its core, it's a way to systematically achieve what you want. And I think the word systematically is really key here, because it's important to develop a framework and develop a very specific attack plan to, achieve your goals, and not just have, aspirations and intentions. Although those are, pure, it's important to understand that sometimes there's a difference between just wanting something and actually setting out a plan to get it. Goal setting is also a process of self-discovery, and I think that's really, really important as well. It's something that's helped me a lot in my life, and it's something I've gone through a lot, especially in the last couple of months. But the process, helps you uncover your value system. So, what things you like, what things you, don't like, what you want out of your career, what you don't want out of your career, and not just, career-related goals, but also relationship-based goals. What city you want to live in, how you want to, create your friend groups and things like that. Like, goal setting extends to all of those. And then, in addition to that, being systematic and intentional is, I think, one of the best ways to kind of live your life, because, I'm a firm believer in, if you kind of just go with the flow, which I do sometimes, on my weekends and things like that. Sometimes it's actually counterintuitive, but having a lot of self-discipline actually frees you up, because what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to choose what you want to work on and how you want to spend your time. And that freedom of choice means you're not just a slave to the moment and whatever comes up, randomly, or like whatever message you got on Facebook. And so, yeah, being intentional is a big part of how I like to live my life. Like I mentioned before, I wanted to start with why. And so I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but I highly recommend looking it up. I think it's like the most watched TED Talk in history. It's by Simon Sinek. And it's basically on, starting with your very core values and understanding why you want to do things. And I think this is a great way to start off a goal setting workshop, just because, in my opinion, everything else that comes from goals really stems from that key foundational, question, which is, why am I doing the things I do? And there's a really good exercise that he kind of outlines. It's called the 5 Whys, which I highly recommend people go through. But it's essentially starting with like any kind of end goal that you have in mind, and then just backtracking from there. So like, let's say it's something like, I want to get good grades. Asking yourself like why you want to get good grades, and then if it's like, oh, I want to get into a good university. Why do you want to get into a good university? and then going backwards from there up to like 5 levels. And that really, really helps kind of like solidify your why and figure out your inner motivations for things. There's also a good quote from the top. It is not logic or facts, but our hopes and dreams, our hearts and our guts that drive us to try new things. Yeah, just one of the few quotes that really spoke to me. Oh yeah, thanks for mentioning that. We will send the presentation after. But really, I think the reason it really spoke to me was there's a difference between motivation and discipline. They're pretty, they sound pretty similar, and everybody kind of likes those, motivational Instagram accounts and things like that to help kind of get you in the positive mindset. And I think those are really positive, but I also think everybody's had that experience where, you're super late at night and it's like 2 a.m. and you're like super motivated to change your life and wake up early the next day and go for a run and all those sorts of things. But the difference between motivation and discipline is, feeling motivated is a short-term thing, and discipline helps you follow through on that long-term. And so we're also going to share, some strategies on how you can not just become motivated, but translate that motivation into discipline. There's also a book called Start With Why that Simon Sinek wrote, which I highly recommend. But this kind of diagram shows sort of like the hierarchy of questions that you need to ask yourself, which is, starting at the outer edge, it's what do you do? The inner circle is how do you do what you do? And then the most core one is why do you do what you do and what's your purpose? And that is, I think, really, really important to keep in mind when doing something like goal setting, because you want to start with why. So what makes a good goal? So I'm going to be talking about a framework called SMART. SMART's a framework that's, pretty popular in kind of the world of goal setting. And I'll talk about sort of like other frameworks to kind of evaluate your goals as well. But SMART is something I use quite a lot just because I really like how they systematically like laid out steps. And I really think that once you can cover all your bases with SMART, makes it a lot easier to kind of follow up on your goals as well. So here's like kind of a summary of what SMART goals are. So it starts off with specific. So, your goal should be clear and specific for motivational purposes. So, and not just for motivational purposes, but also for measurement and attainability and relevance and timeliness as well. And so basically what this means is like your goal should be as specific as possible. So you shouldn't just have a goal of like, getting into a good university or like doing what you want to do. Cause like those are pretty, generic sentences that don't really have like tangible things attached to them. From the chat, it looks like a lot of you have like goal universities, which I think is really cool, and like goal programs. And I think it's always better to have as specific of a goal as possible. And that's something that's really, really helped me. So, if your goal is to like just be fit, that's not really going to work out. But if your goal is to, like more specifically hit a specific time on your mile or like lift a certain amount of weight on your bench press, like those goals, are easier to follow up on, easier to measure, and easier to actually achieve. And so, yeah, I definitely think being specific about your goals is very, very important. The second one is measurable. So being able to chart your progress along with a goal. And this is kind of ties back into being specific because I think specific goals are measurable. And if goals aren't specific, it's really hard to measure them. For example, like, being fit, like, what does that mean? Like, how fit are you going to be before you feel like, you've achieved something? And that sense of achievement, I think, is really, really important for goals in general. So that's something that's super, super important to keep in mind as you're making goals, making sure that you have metrics to be able to measure them. And that might mean a specific body fat percentage in the case of fitness, or, it might mean this specific percentage in terms of your GPA or anything else, right? So yeah, something to keep in mind as you're doing goals. The third one is attainable. So you want your goals to be realistic, and you want them to stretch your abilities but still remain possible. And so what this means is obviously having goals like I want to find the cure for cancer is a positive goal, although obviously not very specific either, because there's a ton of different forms of cancer. But I think the main part of that is making it realistic and making it something that you can stretch for, but also still achieve. Because if it's not achievable, it's not something you can be super motivated behind. And if it's not achievable, it's also super hard to measure your progress against it. So if you start, from like being really, really unfit, which I've been during this quarantine, and just say like, oh, I want to have like a 6-pack in 2 weeks. Like that's not realistic. And because of that, you're probably going to fall off the wagon like really quick. So making sure your goals are attainable is really important. The fourth one is relevance. So, your goals should align with your overall vision. And this ties into kind of what we were talking about before with the whole why and starting with why and starting from that mindset of your values. Because if a goal doesn't align with those values and doesn't align with your why, it's going to be really, really hard to kind of like stick with that goal. And I think keep going back to this example, but fitness is a good one in terms of, if fitness is taking away from time you have for other goals and, you don't really feel like it's relevant to how you're living your life, then it's going to be way, way harder to stick to that because you don't really have that inner motivation. And so making sure your goals are relevant to, your value system is very important. And then finally is the T for time bound. And time bound goals, I think, are just kind of essential for goal setting because kind of going back to measurable and specific as well. If you don't have a start date, an end date, and signpost along the way for you to achieve, it's really, really hard to tell where you are with regards to the goal. And that sort of stuff helps you kind of, have measurable progress along the way and also keep yourself accountable because if you're not hitting your goals by certain dates, then, obviously you're doing something wrong or maybe there's something you can adjust. And so being really realistic about that is important. So I'm going to talk about an example goal that I could think of, which is kind of like related to my own personal goals. So one of my goals, especially at the beginning of university, when I got more into tech after my first internship, was to get an internship at Tesla before I graduate. And I'm gonna go through a little exercise in evaluating this goal in terms of the SMART framework, and then the second goal, which is working on the energy product software team for my third internship as a backend software engineer. And so, kind of right off the bat, it's pretty obvious to see that the first goal is not that specific, and it's somewhat time bound, but it's not as specific as it could be. And because of that, it's kind of hard to measure your progress against it and really think that it's achievable because just getting an internship at Tesla in general is a pretty not only a difficult thing to do, but it's also very ambiguous. Like you can be an intern on a hardware team, you can be an intern on the product management team as a business analyst, as an accountant, as a marketer. Like there's so many different, actually I don't think they do marketing internships, but point being there's a lot of different internships that you can do, and so it's kind of difficult to really make progress towards those goals if they're not specific. And so the second goal I think was one that I set for myself that helped me a lot because of its specificity and because of its time-bound nature. And so not only was it kind of more specific, but it was also more realistic because I decided to do it for my third internship as during the year I took off to do internships for. And that was a lot more realistic because it gave me time to kind of build my skills and network a little bit first before, just diving in and saying I was going to get an internship at Tesla. And because I had already kind of built skills and I'd already kind of signposted my way through, it was much easier to actually achieve that goal. And then obviously the specificity continues. The energy product software team is a specific team at Tesla with a specific manager and, specific team members that I could talk to and, apply to versus, just like Tesla at large is like a huge company and it's easy for your resume to kind of get lost. So having that specificity really helped me. And I actually ended up getting the job because I messaged my manager on LinkedIn and just told him I was interested in his work. So definitely goes a long way to be specific. So that's a good example goal for you guys to kind of follow along with. The next thing that I want to mention is kind of short versus long-term goals. And I'll go through a framework for kind of thinking about these as well. One thing that I struggle with, and I'm not sure if everyone else struggles with it too, but it was definitely huge for me in high school, was that I was a chronic over planner, and I was a classic example of a type A person. And, if you're in this call, perhaps you've had to deal with this as well, just because, respect to you guys for thinking about these things early. But I think for me, it was I had a 10-year plan laid out, and I was I'm going to do this, and this by 10 years. And in 3 years, I'm going to be doing this. And then in 6 years, I'm going to be doing this. And pretty much none of that came true. And that's not to say that it's not going to come true for you guys. Obviously I do encourage you guys to make goals and follow through on your goals. But one thing that I realized was changing your event horizon and your vision of your goals really, really matters a lot. And how I like to think of it is, to try and really make the best of your opportunities today. And, making the best of your opportunities today never precludes you from being able to, achieve your longer term goals eventually. Right. So What I mean by that is like sometimes it's easy to get caught up in like longer term goals and then forget about, you know, the work you have to do right now. And I'm definitely guilty of this, like, especially on internship. I was always like thinking about the next job or like, you know, thinking about the next internship and things like that. And what that does is kind of detracts from your ability to focus on what you're doing right now. And, you know, you lose a lot of the opportunities you're doing or that come along with what you're doing right now. So if you're always focused on university and high school, then, you know, you're not going to take advantage of like clubs and things like that unless you're, you know, using them to get into university. And I don't think that's like probably the best way to, you know, take advantage of your time in high school, right? And build those relationships that might come in handy later on. So definitely thinking about, you know, the term length of your goals is very, very important. And so, yeah, the next point I have is like long-term vision and short-term execution. So you should have, you know, a long-term vision of who you want to be or what industry you want to be or something like that. But in terms of execution, you should keep it short run because, I mean, the reality is like you can only really live in the next couple of weeks. You can't live in 4 years down the line. And I think I'm the perfect example of that. Like me at 17 versus me at 21 is like completely different. And sort of the decisions I made at 17 were decisions I was making for myself at 21, right? So I was like, hey, you know, when I'm 21, I'm gonna be doing this. But like now that I'm 21, I have so much more life experience and I have so much more, you know, things that I've learned. And it really seems dumb for me to have made decisions for myself right now when I was like 4 years younger without all that life experience, right? So I don't know if you guys relate to that, but definitely something that I struggled with. And so just thought I'd share. There's also specificity considerations and measurement considerations when it comes to short versus long-term goals, right? Having like a super, super long-term goal is inherently going to be harder to measure. You know, if it's like to be fulfilled or whatever it is, like those are really, really hard things to measure. And so, you know, you want to adjust how you structure your goals based on the length of time as well. And then, you know, measurement considerations as well extend to like pretty much anything. But, you know, when it's short run, you have a lot more signposts along the way that you're able to achieve. And in addition to that, like short run goals tend to be more attainable overall. And there's like a number of studies that, you know, maybe I can put in the chat later, but like kind of unanimously, they say people who perceive their goals as being attainable overall, regardless of whether they achieve their goals or not, actually report higher cognitive and affective well-being in follow-up surveys. So, you know, what this means is like, even if you're not consistently achieving your goals and they're like, you know, like difficult goals to reach, as long as you think they're attainable and you're setting signposts along the way, you actually end up being happier and more fulfilled in the long run. So that's something important to keep in mind. So yeah, kind of going back to the framework I mentioned, there's like, you know, long-term and short-term goals, and those can be further split up into kind of like these buckets. So I'm going to start with like kind of longer term and then get into the shorter term, you know, on the theme of starting with why. So long-term life goals, you know, are like things that you want to accomplish before, you know, you die, right? They're things like buying a house, you know, be a mechanical engineer, get a master's degree, things like that, right? That are like super, super long-term and kind of things you accomplish over the course of your life. Or, you know, it could be make a certain amount of money or things like that. And then on the other side of long-term goals is also capstone goals. And so one that a lot of you guys can relate to is probably getting into a university, right? So, you know, those aren't over the course of your lifetime, but they're pretty major milestones and like kind of segments along the way. And it's a good way for you to kind of measure your goal against your lifetime goal, but also, you know, still not be too short term. And then on the other hand, we have like the two short term goals, which are foundational and provisional goals. Foundational goals are like sort of setting you up for your capstone goals. So, you know, if one of your capstone goals was to get an internship at Tesla, for example, then you know, a foundational goal to like achieve that would be to, you know, get an internship this term in order to, you know, kind of set yourself up and set your resume up for an internship at Tesla later on. You know, or vice versa. Getting into a specific university, a foundational goal might be to get straight A's or a specific GPA in your last year of high school, or, you know, your last semester of high school. So that's a good way of thinking about it. And then finally, you have provisional goals, which are like, you know, even more short run. So provisional goals are like, you know, ace this test in order to like help with your GPA, or like, you know, complete X hours of practice of this instrument in order to like take the exams for it later on. So things like that really help you kind of break down your goals into these buckets and, you know, eventually achieve them. So we're going to be getting into kind of projects as well, because that was kind of a highlight of the workshop too. So I think goals are great. And, I think everybody has like different goals they want to achieve, whether it be like a university goal or like a career goal, a relationship goal, a money goal, things like that. But I think a huge problem people run into is this kind of like circular notion. And I use internship in my example, but it kind of applies to a lot of different things. But it's the idea of like, to get a good job, research position, or internship, I need to have good jobs, research position, internships on my resume. So it's the circular issue where you need the thing, chicken and egg type thing, where you need the thing to get the thing. And it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and it's hard to kind of break out of. And obviously it makes sense why companies would prefer people with a lot of internship experience beforehand, or people with a lot of research positions beforehand. And I think all of you guys are in the right boat in terms of starting early in high school, but a lot of times people feel like they're super behind, and it's like too late to start working on these things because like everybody else has already done them. And I think this is super wrong, and a great way to solve this is to work on projects. And by projects, I kind of mean like a catch-all term for a lot of different things. I'm in tech, and projects often in tech involve, making an app or like building a website or something like that. But, for all you people in other fields out there, I think there's a lot of different projects you can work on. There's hardware projects you can work on, building like a robot or, a device that does something. And it can be as simple as like, just coding an Arduino for like 2 hours and like making it, like automate the food dispensing process for your pet if it comes near, using an RFID tag, something like that, which, sounds complicated, but actually only takes like probably like 3 to 4 hours of work. So things like that, right? And it could also be, research projects where, you have a hypothesis on like a specific, a chemical you're studying, or, I did a lot of acid-base titrations. And so I did a project on that when I was in high school that actually stood out on my resume when I applied to research positions, even though it was like pretty basic. So things like that, I think are all examples of projects. And the next thing I want to talk about is like why projects. So I think there's a lot of reasons to work on projects, but the main ones are the 4 points I listed here. The first is to gain real industry experience, which is really hard, as somebody coming straight out of high school. Personally, when I was in high school, I hadn't done any like big internships or anything like that. And I know a lot of high school kids do these days, and like people are working like in grade 11, for these big tech companies and things like that. And that's really respectable. But for me personally, like that wasn't really an opportunity I'd been exposed to or like was able to achieve at that point. And so I think projects are a great way to gain real industry experience, in the sense that, you're working on real technology that people use, or, real concepts in the industry, like testing your hypothesis, designing an experiment, or, building a service for others, or, starting a business, things like that, where, you're able to gain that experience without having to have that internship. Another way that they help a lot is like showing genuine passion. And so, I think if you have the motivation to stick with longer term project for like 3 to 4 months, being able to talk about that, and that 3 to 4 months of work that you did, whether it was on weekends, weeknights, whatever it was, really exhibits your passion for that role. And it really shows that you're going out of your way to kind of like set yourself up for that role. And I think companies would really, really appreciate that in an interview, or, PIs or whoever else it is. We'll get to the question later. Sorry, I will check. But the next thing that I wanted to mention is it allows you to network as well. So as you're working on these projects, a great way, and there was a networking workshop earlier, and so I think Nova, you can probably find that on Nova's page, like a recording of it. But a great way to kind of like, or a great thing that you get out of project is networking with industry professionals. And so as you're working on these things, not only you're working on the latest tech, but you can like reach out on LinkedIn to people who, have worked with similar tech and say, hey, I'm working on this project. I was wondering if you can give me advice on how to use this better. Or, if you're working on a specific area of research and that there's like a prof in that area at specific university, like reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm working on this research. I know that you're an expert in it. I was wondering if you had any advice on my project or things like that. And like that just goes in hand with like gaining real industry experience and showing genuine passion, because you're exhibiting that passion to people in the industry, you're networking with them, and you're also, gaining industry experience in the sense that you're working with people in the industry, which is pretty cool. And then finally, fill up resume space. Like honestly, like I would be remiss if I like didn't mention the importance of that. Like, let's be honest, like, people have clubs and things like that, but coming out of high school, my resume is pretty sparse. Pretty embarrassed to even link it, so I won't. But that evolves over time, and projects are a great way to show like genuine passion and industry experience and fill up that resume space. Like I mentioned, we want to tie in goal setting with projects. So a great way to do that is to build like a SMART project and really focus on those, that acronym as like a framework for building your project. So I have like a few bullet points under this that you can obviously read, but I'll talk through a few of them as well. Obviously you want your project to be specific. So you want to really think about what your project is solving, who it's solving it for, and if it's a research project, like what's your specific hypothesis? I'm sure people have like done this in high school, but like, you can't just build an experiment without like a very clear idea of what you're trying to achieve with that experiment. And that's kind of like a central part of the scientific method. If your project is to build a company, like, which customers are you serving? Like what products are you selling, and why do those products like actually solve those needs for that customer, right? So making your project as specific as possible is very, very important. Continue on, like, measurable is very important as well, because you want to be able to tell that you solved the project that you're doing. And with research, a hypothesis is a great way to do that, but with like things like side projects and things like that, it's also important to have metrics, like how many users do you want to achieve by a certain time, or like how do you know that you've made an impact on the customers that you're solving? Like if you build like a workout app, like how many users do you want using it? How do you want it to affect their experience working out? Things like that are like very, very important questions to ask. Attainable, and I mentioned this as a bullet point, but obviously if that's what you're interested in and you have a specific plan for it, please go ahead. But don't set out to do things that are super, super like far in the future and really hard to attain. And personally speaking, like, if you're not an expert in AI or ML, like don't set out to create like something that beats the Turing test and like, is the first like automated like in history and like destroys the human race. Like make sure your goals are attainable and that you can actually like, achieve them like within a realistic time period. That's just important to keep in mind. Relevance is another important thing. So like, with that project, like, is it something you're interested in doing for a specific reason? Is it just you're doing it to fill your resume? Is it within an industry that you actually have interest in? And to kind of preface that as well, like a good way to even find out if you're interested in an industry, and this is something that I do a lot, is to just try it and just like build a project in it and see how you like doing it. And like, I think a big thing for me is like, I use university as like a huge time to explore my interests. Cause I was just interested in so many different things. And I'm very much of the mindset that, you just got to do everything once. And then if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But by trying these things, you get to gradually eliminate the things that, you think you want to do. And then eventually you'll find your passion. You know what I mean? And so I think like, just setting out and saying that something is your passion without trying it is pretty dangerous, especially when you're younger. It's okay if you do have one. And then on top of that, I would add that not only is it okay, but you should really try and make a project in it, or get an internship in it or something like that, or set a specific goal related to that project or interest, because that'll allow you to actually see if you want to follow up on it, or if you think it's better to pivot. And then obviously, have a time bound project as well. Don't just like go into it being like, hey, I want to work on this app to like, help people work out. And then, not have signposts along the way, not have a release date for your app. And public contracts is a really good way of doing this. The concept of public contracts is just like, telling other people that you're going to do something by a certain date kind of creates this like peer pressure and like sense of responsibility to actually do it and follow up on it. Cause you don't want to just be like somebody who doesn't live by their word. So that's a really great way of doing that. But yeah, making sure that your goals and your projects are timed out. Just to like expel or like get away from the idea that all projects have to be tech related and like apps and things like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about my podcast and how that was like an example project for me. And kind of evaluate it with respect to the SMART framework. So my project, Into the Yellowverse, which is just a podcast I started with a friend, still follows these lines, and it doesn't really seem like a traditional project, but it's still like a great way for you to like kind of use this framework in order to kind of achieve your goal. So I started with like a very specific intention, and started with why I wanted to even do a podcast in the first place. That was like to help people transitioning into young adulthood. A sort of side like motivation of it too, just like to record my thoughts, because I thought it'd be super, super cool to like just have this on air or like on paper and like be able to reflect on it in 30 years and be like, yeah, I was a dumbass back then. So yeah, that was like a sub motivation, but having that specific reasoning behind your project is great to have. Then the second was that it was a measurable project. So, I had like specific monthly listener goals I wanted to reach. I wanted to be available on specific platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever it was. And so those really helped me kind of like measure my progress along the way, and like transition from there. So like, if we weren't hitting, specific amount of listeners by this month, I knew that, either we had to put out more content or we had to, change things on promo or whatever it was. The third point was attainable or achievable. And, I think podcasting was definitely very easily attainable, because it has really low upfront costs. Like all you really need is like, I think a SoundCloud premium membership, or you can even use Anchor, which is another app, which is like $30 a year or something. And then you need like $100 mic. So it was like pretty cheap to get started with. And promoing you can all do over social media. Like you can buy ads if you need to, but to be honest, like we haven't bought ads yet. We just like promo it on LinkedIn and things like that. So a good example of how it's like achievable and attainable for me. And it's relevant to my personal interests. This is really, really important because if I didn't like doing it, I would never release an episode. So making sure it's something that you actually enjoy doing is important. And then finally, the time-bound nature of it was, I aim to have a specific number of episodes like released like every week, which was like one episode a week, and then like a specific number of episodes by the month and things like that. And so I also had like monthly listener goals. So like, by 3 months in, I wanted this many listeners, or, think like this many likes on our LinkedIn page and things like that. So that's a good example of a project that isn't necessarily like super, super technical, more of like a passion project, and doesn't really involve, like a ton of money or a ton of resources or anything, but it's still a great way for you to show you're passionate about something. And yeah, that's all I had kind of planned out for the presentation. I think we can get into some really interesting discussion points. Sort of like if you have more specific questions. Thanks so much for listening to me. I can give you guys a little bit more of a background on like my experiences and things like that as well. We'll go through the questions in the chat as well, but feel free to ask more. And yeah, thank you to Sachi and the team for having me on. Cool. So I guess I'll go through the questions right now. How can you stop procrastinating by Alyssa? And the startup scene. Cool. I think, goal setting is pretty essential to like helping you with procrastination. And that's something that really, really helped me a lot. When you have specific milestones you want to reach, it's way easier to kind of, stop procrastinating, because you create that sort of like internal pressure on yourself. Like, procrastinators are procrastinators, but they're not people who do nothing. So if you have like a time bound, deadline, procrastinators will wait until the last minute, but they'll still do something. And so pretty much if you increase the frequency of your, like, your milestones and your signposts and things like that, what'll happen is that even if you procrastinate, you're still getting a certain amount done every week. So like, even if I procrastinate, like on my podcast episodes, I'm releasing one every week. And so it's not like I'm waiting like 3 months before I release an episode. So it's still like a good way for me to, limit that procrastination. I have a lot of thoughts on the startup scene. I'll actually link a podcast episode of mine that talks about it. But we'll try to get to more of the questions that are sort of like on the goal setting in general. Where at Tesla, I was in Palo Alto on the energy product software team, like I mentioned. Question: how would you recommend handling comments from teachers saying that you should not pursue your specific career path? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a really shitty thing for a teacher to say, first of all. Like, I don't think you should go into the teaching profession if you ever have that attitude with a kid. But that's another discussion. Yeah, I mean, handling that comment is, obviously very personal, and I'm super sorry that happened to you if that happened to you. Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing is really picking and choosing who you go to for advice. A good example of that is honestly my mom. Like, I love my mom, but my mom is a kindergarten teacher, and so she doesn't really, have the same industry experience in terms of like her career and things like that. So I don't really go to her for a lot of the more technical decisions or like, career decisions I need to make. And so, one thing I would say is that your teacher probably doesn't know you that well. You know what I mean? Like, and even if they know your grades are not an indicator of, like what career path you're going to go down and like things like that. I'm like a firm believer in the fact that grades do not determine intelligence whatsoever. And so, yeah, I mean, like I would ask, like, is it even worth listening to her comments whatsoever? And, it's easier said than done to ignore that. But, like, yeah, I mean, I just think it's super shitty of someone to do, and you should really examine their intentions. Like, does she really have your best interests at heart? Okay, next question was, what do you do at Twitter? So I'm a software engineering intern at Twitter. I work on the health organization. So it's actually pretty topical, which is cool. Because of all this, like, all these social movements happening right now. And I don't know if you guys have seen Trump's tweets, but Twitter recently put like a little warning on it saying that it wasn't really factually correct. And that caused like a huge, uproar because Trump was like, oh, I'm going to delete Twitter, blah, blah, blah. And he like threatened to like, take us to court and things like that. Cause he's a big baby. But anyways, yeah, what do I work on Twitter? So I work within the health organization, and basically we build tools to kind of stop and moderate and censor unsafe content on Twitter. So that includes things like child pornography, hate speech, terrorist recruitment, things like that. So it's pretty cool because it's like an interesting intersection of ethics, social media, and also just like public conversation. Like Twitter's main like tagline is "We're here to serve the public conversation," which I think is really cool. And so yeah, basically I build tools to stop things like that from getting on Twitter, or escalating those to the relevant authorities. So like if like some terrorist activity gets posted on Twitter, you want to escalate it to the Department of Homeland Security and things like that. So yeah, next question. Ooh, there's a lot of questions. Next question is what I did at Tesla. I worked on the energy products software team. And so basically we were working on microgrids. And so long story short, it's the idea of like a distributed power system where we use solar panels for everything. So currently we have like a consumer model of the grid where, every home consumes energy from the grid and doesn't really produce energy. And we want to move to a prosumer model where every home produces energy and consumes energy. So basically I worked on functional programming and like distributed systems architecture for them, where we would like take like an area of batteries or like homes, like, like an entire town or something like that, and use it as one battery to like power another area or something like that. We also worked on like a feature called Storm Watch, which is pretty cool, where, if there's like a hurricane coming, you would shunt power from other jurisdictions into that area, or like charge up batteries for people so they have power during the hurricanes. We helped in a couple earthquakes, I think, as well, and like a hurricane in Puerto Rico. So that was pretty cool. How do I use tech with other stuff? Maybe Jesse, if you want to clarify that question a little bit more, that would be cool. I don't know if like other stuff means something in particular. Would science fair wins look good on resumes? Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty hard to think of why they would look bad. But I would say like, focus on what you really want to get out of that science fair. And like, it also depends on like what kind of jobs you're going for and like what universities and goals you're going for from that resume. Can you do multiple projects at once? Absolutely. I'm working on like a couple different projects right now. I'm also working 2 jobs, and so that's not to say that I'm like super on top of my shit or anything like that. I'm definitely not. I spend a lot of nights watching anime, but I definitely think it's possible to work on more than one project at once. I think it's just a matter of prioritizing and really focusing on what you want to do in terms of like dropping priorities that you don't want. So if it's a project you're not super interested in and you're going to dedicate 1 hour a week to it, I feel like you should just drop something like that. So yeah, being good with prioritization. How do you set up a good team? Dude, honestly, I think university is a great place to do that because you just meet so many people from like so many different backgrounds. And so, if I was ever to start a company, I think I would definitely start it with some of the people I met at university. But I think a good team consists of really like people who have like a shared goal in mind and have skill sets that complement each other. So what I mean by that is like, you don't want a team of all engineers who all think the same. You really want a diverse team of like different people. And you also want, diversity of thought, not just like diversity of people. So you want to have business people and things like that as well. I think it really depends on what you're going for too. So like setting up a good, team dynamic depends on what kind of problem you're trying to solve. Also, you asked a ton of questions, but I'm going to get to a couple other people's and then get to yours as well, just in case they have to drop off. So Nathaniel said, what advice would you give to a grade 10 student who has 2 months of summer and can figure out what to do? I think you came to the right presentation because first off, I think goal setting is really important in this case, and so is projects because you have 2 months of summer left, and I think the first step is really figuring out what you want to do. And if I'll be honest, like between grade 10 and 11, I did nothing. I just played outside. I just hung out with my friends. Which I don't necessarily recommend doing for everybody. If you have a goal, that's really great. But I would say take a lot of time to do some soul searching. I had a month off in May, and I do this exercise that I think a lot of people would benefit from. Where basically what I do is every year I sit down and set aside like 3 or 4 hours like out of the day, and I just like turn off all my social media and sit there with like a pen and paper and basically what I do is like I create like a value system for myself from scratch, and I include like last year's value system as sort of like a measurement piece. So like what I'll do is like I'll really start, and it goes back to starting with why, but like I'll literally like just sit down and be like, what do I value in life? Like what are some of the qualities I value? So like honesty, integrity, friendship, being career minded, being hardworking, things like that. And like write those down, and then take last year's and see what did I value last year. How have those changed over time? What have I reprioritized? And like also, charting my progress against them. So like taking last year's goals and being like, did I actually was I actually honest last year? I'm like, did I show my honesty through my interactions with people? And if it's not something you're doing, maybe it's not something you value as much, and you want to take it off the list. And I'm not saying be a liar. It was just an example, but that's like a really good exercise in terms of just like figuring out what you want to do and like what you want to get out of life. Because a lot of times you realize through this process that some of these like things that you want to do, for me, it was like being a doctor. Like I think my mom really pressured me into being a doctor. She had like her own reasons for it, but like I never really got excited about medicine in the same way that I did about industry. And like there are things about the medical industry that I just didn't suit my personality as well. And so really asking why you want to do what you do, and then centering in on like, is it something that I want to do for myself? And focusing on like how your influences have affected you is a really important way. And then, from there, building goals off of that. 2 months is a long time. You'd be surprised. Like, you do have a ton of time to do things, especially if you're not working. So yeah, like starting with that, starting with the why kind of idea, and then going from there, I'm actually translating that into a goal that you want to do would be my suggestion. Cool. Choosing only one interest because I have many. Dude, that's perfect. I think you should have more than one interest. I definitely do not think people should have one interest. There's actually this like YouTuber I follow. His name's like Brandon something. Maybe I can like send him a chat later. But basically, he's like a full-time software engineer at Google, and he's also a rapper. And he's not like obviously the best rapper ever, but he has this like theory called like the multi-dream theory or whatever, where he's basically like, why should your goals be mutually exclusive? Like, to be honest, you do have a ton of time in the day, and like, I think you should take advantage of all the interests you have and really try and explore them. And I kind of mentioned this in the presentation, but like, yeah, I was interested in a ton of stuff. Like I was interested in biotech. I've obviously worked in a ton of different industries as well. And, one way that I did that was I took an internship year to kind of like explore 4 different industries that I thought were interesting, like consulting, financial technology, clean energy, and social media. And I was interested like high key in all of them. Right. And so doing that was like a way for me to explore them. So if you have a ton of interest, I would say try and pursue all of them. Obviously do some prioritization in terms of tasks and things like that, but definitely don't choose one, especially at this point. Unless you super love it and that's what you want to do. But for me, and I think for most people, that's not the case. Rita asked, what are good volunteer opportunities for students who want to go into medicine? This is a good question. I'm going to caveat this with the fact that I've like kind of moved away from the medical industry, but I obviously did do a lot of research and was involved in the industry for a while. So yeah, I mean, there are a ton of different research programs. I don't know what area you're in particular, Rita, but where I was at, Toronto General Hospital actually had a volunteer research program for high school students, which was super cool. I didn't do it because I didn't know it existed, and I really, really wish I'd had. But there's actually quite a number of research opportunities that you can get into as a high school student. And even if you just like find researchers online at different hospitals or different universities, almost all of them will be open to, like a 30-minute chat really quick. If you like take the initiative to actually email them and just be like, hey, I want to find out more about your research. And a lot of times you can leverage that into a research position. And sometimes it's volunteer, sometimes it's paid. It'll probably be volunteer if you're a high school student, but highly recommend doing that. There's also like, specific volunteer research programs that a couple different hospitals run. And then there's, obviously, volunteering at, medical centers, as a receptionist and things like that. And while that might not be directly related to what a doctor does, it's still a very good way to kind of get your foot in the door, meet people, and also just understand how a clinic works. So those are some recommendations I have. How much of an impact will grade 9 and 10 marks have on uni applications? The way you worded this makes me think you're from Canada, and hopefully that's the case. If you are from Canada, Leah, to be honest, not much. I'll be honest, just because I think it's like the best way to, have a workshop like this. I had a 69 in French in grade 10, and I actually pulled that up to like a 95 by my grade 12 year, but I was really bad at French. And so, it didn't affect me at all. So I'm just going to put that out there. Don't have bad grades because I think building good study habits is important, but I wouldn't tear your hair out if you get like a couple bad grades at grade 9 and 10. Definitely in Canada, at least, the focus is on grade 11 and 12. And for U.S. universities, they might look at things like cumulative GPA, but I think for the most part, they also care about your later years. What is the programming language that you've used the most during internships? This is a good question, but I'd just like to preface this with there's a ton of different programming languages out there, and it really depends on what you want to do. So my answer might not be like a be-all, end-all for this. I think there's a lot of different languages that can be used for a lot of different things. And so personally, I use Scala a lot. Scala is it's a JVM variant where it has like a lot of functional programming built in. I did that because it's popular distributed systems and because Tesla and Twitter both used it. And I just thought functional programming was cool. But, if you're in machine learning, you'll probably use Python a lot more than other ones and things like that. So yeah, I wouldn't really focus on programming language. Honestly, it matters a lot more that you know how to use the tools. Like one thing you'll realize pretty quickly is that companies don't hire people for languages for the most part, especially new grads. Like nobody's an expert in language by 21. And so what they like at Google, for example, you can be placed on a team where you have no idea what the language is. That's what happened to me at Tesla. I didn't know Scala at all, and I got a job at Tesla for Scala. And really what they do is they hire smart people who have good programming fundamentals, and then they have faith that you can figure it out within a week or two. So yeah, just gonna preface it with that. With that being said, Python's a really great language to pick up if you're beginning. MB said, are there any biology research opportunities for high schoolers? I kind of went over this before. I think there's a lot of biology research opportunities. Like I mentioned, hospitals have different programs and things like that. And there's also volunteer programs as well. Cool. I'm going to go back to a couple of Alyssa's questions because she had a lot. How far did you have to plan before taking a gap year? Good question. It depends on the school you're at. For McMaster, we have this pretty common thing that a lot of people do because our engineering department is more focused on civil engineering and mechanical engineering, where people take a 16-month gap year, or not gap year. It's sanctioned by our school. It's co-op, where you work for 16 months and then come back and finish your fourth year. So 16 months means you end your term at the end of April or May, and then you have the summer. Then you have 2 more terms for the school year. So it's 8 + 4, 12. You do the summer again, and then you come back to school. So you're effectively 1 year behind. But you can do 4 co-op terms. You can do 3 and take a summer off. I decided to do 4 because I needed the money, quite frankly. But I didn't have to plan that far in advance. I just let my school know that I was going to do it, and then there's some co-op fees you have to pay. It's $300 per term, which isn't that bad. It was a little bit of a risk because I actually only had 1 job offer when I started out. It was if I don't get a job offer, I've already said I'm not going to do school. So what the fuck am I going to do for 4 months? So yeah, there is an element of risk if you're doing that, but it was super, super worth it for me. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. Would you say you look actively for opportunities and how? Yes, absolutely. I definitely approach opportunities actively. I think that's a really important part of building good projects and just getting making good things happen. I think LinkedIn was a great way for me to do it. Actually, Sachi messaged me on LinkedIn and was like, hey, do you want to run a workshop for us? And that was how I got introduced to this opportunity in the first place, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely think I do look actively. How I look actively is, obviously LinkedIn is a great way. Just scrolling through your feed. So a little bit of backstory for those of you still on. I got my job at Tesla because I was literally scrolling through LinkedIn when I was on the toilet. And pretty much what happened was I saw a pretty cool post. It was a blog article, and I read it, and it was on distributed systems, which is something I wanted to kind of explore. during my internship journey. Like I wanted to like do like a front end, back end, and then distributed systems and like a couple other subjects. So I knew I wanted to do distributed systems. So I read the article and I messaged the guy, and it appeared in my feed because one of my friends liked the article. So it wasn't even like, a guy I followed or anything like that. So so I messaged the guy who wrote the article and I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. I would love to schedule like a 30-minute chat with you or something and learn about what you're working on at Tesla and I get your thoughts and stuff. And he said yes. And then at the end of the conversation, I just kind of asked him, hey, do you is your team hiring by any chance? And he said yes. And so I started the interview process that way. He was send me your resume, and that guy ended up being my manager. So being active about opportunities, really being open and kind of having no shame was a big one for me too. I literally just message anyone. So yeah, that's a big one. And then were you stressed out about applying for uni? I probably should have been more stressed out looking back on it, but I was definitely stressed out. And that's okay. Everybody's stressed out, I think. It's important to normalize, that feeling. Or okay, maybe not normalize, maybe it shouldn't be that stressful, but realize that it's okay to be stressed and it's something that kind of everyone experiences, and really focusing on what you can control, because that was an important one for me. How do you start a podcast? It's pretty easy. You can DM me after if you're interested. But literally, it's you can get started on SoundCloud for free, and just upload MP3 files. You do hit a limit pretty quick in terms of just how much memory you can have on SoundCloud without having a paid account. And then there's another platform called Anchor. I don't record using it, but you can. Pretty much all you need is a mic. You can use your laptop mic. You can use your AirPods if you have them, or your headphones. It won't be the best, but it's possible. And yeah, that's how I started. You put it on SoundCloud. There's an RSS feed thing you can do. And then, Jasmine, I just had a question. It's super nervous. But yeah, there's an RSS feed link you can get, and you literally just apply to have it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. It's all free to get it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. They have to approve it first to watch one of your episodes and make sure it's not slander or copyright. And then you got approved within a week for Apple. So yeah. How do you sound so chill with interviews? Is it not nerve-wracking for you? It is absolutely nerve-wracking. And I just want to say that it's not something that's easy, and it's never going to be something that's for me, it was never something that came naturally to me. But I want to preface this with, I had about 100 interviews in calendar year 2019 because I had to do 4 different co-op terms, and I'm kind of picky about where I want to work. So I had a couple offers that I didn't like as much. And so I literally had 100 interviews with various companies within calendar year 2019. So it's something you build. It's a skill like anything else. You start really nervous and you don't really know what's going on. And then obviously, you get better at it over time. And so, yeah, that's a big thing for me. I think, one thing that stuck with me is focusing on what you can control. You can't control if your interview is rude or not. You can't control, if it's a video interview, your internet quality. You can't control, if your interview had a bad day that day and just doesn't want to hire you, or maybe they've already even filled the position. I had an interview with Pinterest, which was at the time was probably my highest priority company to work for, because I love the product, and the team I was going to interview for was a super cool team with good mentorship. And I had an amazing interview. I solved the question, the coding question they gave me, and it was great communication. And I even had live talks with the guy because I solved it super quick, and for the last 20 minutes we just talked about moving and deep talks about life. And I got insta rejected within 30 minutes after that interview, and that sucked. And I was super mopey about it, but when you think about it, it's you focus on the things you can control, and the things you can't control are if for that position, or if it just wasn't a good day for him or something like that. So that's a big thing for interviews. And then interview prep, the more you do, the better you get at them. So I interview prep a lot with friends. So yeah, I know there are other questions. Sashi, I don't know if you're comfortable with this, but I'm okay with people going off mute and asking a question in person if they want.
Yeah. No, yeah, we definitely welcome if people do have questions that they'd rather ask verbally over the chat, actually engage in conversation, rather than just staying muted. You're more than welcome to, because now it's just that kind of time to kind of have discussions. We could have, like you said, you with your Pinterest interview, your life talks or something. Yeah. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. You can also ask in the chat as well. We can continue that.
Yeah, for sure.
Too.
I don't know if I missed any.
Let's see.
There was, how do you use tech with other stuff? That's a good point, because like it's kind of the focus of Nova X, I guess. Yeah, like I mentioned, the team I'm at Twitter is like a very interdisciplinary team. Like, you know, we deal with a lot of ethics, we deal with a lot of like philosophy and that type of thing. You know, a lot of law, because, you know, our team is also responsible for like implementing policies that different governments have in place with reporting and like freedom of speech and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I use tech with a lot of different things. And yeah, I mean, like I think the biggest thing is like realizing that tech is like a field that touches so many different things that it's important to like just kind of be aware of that. And so, yeah, that's one way I use tech with other stuff. I don't know if you had any more specific questions. There's more. My internet's not usually, no worries, that's super fine. Where did you volunteer to get your hours in high school? So I was in the IB program, so we had like a mandatory 200 hours we had to do. It was like hella annoying. But I actually did most of my volunteer hours at school. I was like I was like the president of athletic council or something. And sorry, not or something. I was the president of athletic council, and I like just like spent a lot of time after school like repping games and things like that, or like doing lines for sports. So not something super exciting. So yeah, I mean, there's probably better volunteer opportunities, but this is what I did. So yeah. How do you assess which job offers to refuse? This is a really good question. It's a deep conversation. I actually talk about this more in my podcast, which I will put in the chat so that you guys can just as a little shameless self-plug. Anyways, I have a podcast episode on it, but pretty much I think the episode's called Breaking in Attack, but I have like a framework for thinking about offers where basically I consider like a bunch of different things. For me, salary wasn't really high on my priority list. But essentially what I do is I make a decision matrix. It's like a pretty common methodology to like make decisions, and I do it for like an embarrassingly large amount of decisions, even like personal decisions I use a decision matrix for, which is like kind of sus, but whatever. Like I set up like columns and I assign weightings to each column. And I'm like, okay, like how much does salary matter to me out of 5? And then, or like, you know, how much does salary matter to me? Maybe it's like 5 points. How much does location matter to me? Maybe it matters more than salary, so it's like 8 points. And then for every offer, mark yourself out of like how much it like achieves those needs, and then just take the one that has the biggest, you know, score. That's how I make my decisions. I think for me, a big thing was mentorship, because mentorship and network, because internship, like to be honest, you're working there for 4 months. Salary doesn't really matter. Like I actually refused a lot of offers with higher salary than Twitter. Although Twitter salary isn't bad. Because, you know, Twitter had a lot of great mentorship, and it was like in a position, or like in a field I was hella interested in. And so interest is another huge one for me too. Like, you know, mentorship matters a lot, because to be honest, like you don't really know that much as an intern, so you really need the support of like, you know, full-times and things like that on your team. And then continuing on, salary is a consideration, but for me, location is a bigger consideration. I'd spent a couple terms in Toronto, so I didn't want to live in Toronto anymore. I really wanted to be in New York for this term, and I had an offer at Disney to work in New York, but I took Twitter instead, because Twitter had better pay and was more aligned with my interests. Like Disney's a cool company, but I wasn't really super interested in media, or like I was more interested in social media than like pure media. And yeah, mentorship is better at Twitter as well. So yeah, those are all really important to me. Would you credit your athletic background? Jasmine with the questions, let's go. Athletic background for your discipline mindsets is you requires to pursue. Yeah, absolutely. I think sports are a great way. Sorry, I didn't read out the question for everyone. Let me do that again. Would you credit your athletic background for your discipline mindset, since it usually requires one to persist in sports for large amounts of time? And yeah, to answer that question, absolutely I do. I think, I mean, it doesn't deserve all the credit, but a huge part of athletics is like, you know, kind of grinding it out. There's a great book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell that kind of examines, you know, why exceptional people do exceptional things. And a huge part of it is like intentional practice. And for me, that was really important in terms of just like building the mindset that, you know, there are things that you don't like doing, like working out necessarily, or like going for that run, or like doing those drills to play soccer, where like those drills aren't as fun as playing a game and like aren't really creative, but you just kind of have to do them. And so for coding, it's like that too. Like, for interview prep, you have to solve a ton of coding questions, and it sucks. And like, there's a website called leetcode.com where you can, I'll put the link in the chat, where you can like practice those questions. But to be honest, it sucks, and like it's super painful, and it's not fun, but you have to do it because it's the only way you can do well in your interview. So yeah, discipline is you can get that from playing an instrument, you get that from playing a sport, like a lot of different things.
I wanted to ask a question if you're...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sure. So I guess like when you first started out, it was, I don't know, I guess your turnaround rate, how many like internships you applied to versus how many you accepted. It's just, how do you kind of like stay motivated, if you feel like you're getting a lot of rejections or something's not aligning with your goals? Like, how do you stay motivated to like keep going, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Yeah, so a little bit of background. So I did my first internship in research, and then I got into tech after that. And even though I had a little bit of coding experience from my research position, didn't have a whole lot. And so my summer between second and third year, which is like a year older than you are right now, Sachi, I applied to like 400 different internships. I had 6 interviews, and I got 0 offers. I literally did not get a job that summer. I mean, a tech job. Like, I could have worked, like, I guess somewhere else maybe, but I don't even know. I got rejected from McDonald's a couple of times when I was in high school, so maybe not even that. But yeah, it was super disheartening and like super, it's super sucky. And that summer, what I did was I actually ended up working for a startup that was like based out of the Forge, which is the McMaster startup incubator. And yeah, I basically did unpaid work for them. I was paid in equity, but then the company went bust, so like the equity was worth nothing. Equity is like part ownership in the company or whatever. And so yeah, like, I think a big thing about dealing with rejection is, transforming that rejection into opportunity regardless. Like, even if you're rejected from, your top choices and things like that, there's still things you can do. There's always things you can do to, keep pushing towards your goals. And one thing that was big for me was I realized that, I want to do internships because I wanted to build cool things, work on cool products, and work with cool companies. And I realized that, at the core of being an engineer was like building cool shit, really. And just because I didn't get an internship at a company I wanted doesn't mean I couldn't do that. And so, yeah, like focusing on like what you can do, like I mentioned, is super important. Definitely like overtones of like Stoic philosophy or whatever. So yeah, I mean, also having faith in like the long-term results of your success. So an analogy I like to draw is, let's say there's like a 5% chance. Let's say like everybody's looking for their dream job and they start in year 0. And then every year they have a 5% chance of getting their dream job. And every year that they do a shit ton of hard work, they get a plus 20% chance of getting their dream job because of their work, right? In that first year, if there's 100 people, 5 of them will get their dream job without doing a shit ton of hard work. And even the people that do a shit ton of hard work, who have a 25% chance after the first year is done, still might not get their dream job. And the third year, when it's 45%, they still might not get their dream job, and this 5% might, right? So there is a little bit of luck involved in it. But basically what you realize is that by the 3rd or 4th year, you're almost certainly going to get your dream job because you've been putting in the work, right? And so success isn't always linear. There is random elements to success. And there are things like, like unconscious bias and things like that, which, is another discussion for another day. But at the end of the day, if you do the work, you will get better at it. And you might not see results immediately, but it'll come through. So, yeah, a little pep talk. A good question. There's another question in the chat that I think I'll answer. Have you found ways to improve yourself in your resume during the pandemic? Good question. Okay. I actually started working recently with a nonprofit called giftforward.co. I'll link them in the chat because I think they're cool. But basically, I was on a phone call with a friend from high school. Actually, like the girl I took to prom in high school, which is pretty crazy because we're still friends now, which is cool. And basically, like we were just like catching up, talking about our lives, blah blah blah. And she like just graduated because she's like the same year as me, and she didn't do a co-op year. And I was like complaining about like restaurants and like how I can't, like I'm like low key a foodie. I won't like my food ID because it's kind of bad, but like I love eating out at new restaurants and things like that. And so I was like kind of disappointed by the pandemic and like that. I can go out to eat more, which is like something I really enjoy doing. And I think Uber Eats is scam, so I never Uber Eats. So yeah, I was like complaining about that, and like she mentioned that she like knew this guy that was working at this like nonprofit, and basically the premise of Gift Forward was like to help small businesses and like local restaurants who like were struggling through the pandemic by offering discounted gift cards and essentially like allowing people to buy these gift cards at a discount right now with the expectation that they can't use the gift card right now because the restaurant's closed, but the restaurant still needs money right now because they have upfront costs like rent, property tax, things like that. They still have to keep the lights on, but they're not getting new customers. So yeah, you you buy these gift cards and the business gets the money immediately and they can use it to help with those costs. And then, like 3 months down the line when things open up, you can start using it at the restaurant. And so I ended up joining them and doing some like coding work for them on the side. That was one way I kind of found ways to improve my resume during the pandemic. And in terms of improving myself, I did a lot of self-reflection and I was pretty hammered on my podcast, got it like scheduled out and like really good episodes. Or I say really good, maybe it's horrible, but like good in my eyes in terms of like the quality I wanted out of them. Yeah, those are some ways. I started running a lot more too. Follow me on Strava, Fuad Ali. But yeah, those are some ways I tried to improve myself during quarantine. Keep the questions coming if you guys have some. I still have some time. But if you leave too, feel free.
I guess I'll ask another one because I'm just curious, like what you want to do after you graduate.
Yeah. You put me on the spot here.
Or like ideas.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a lot of ideas, and but basically, like I really like software engineering, and I think it was great for internships. And I'm really happy I had like a strong technical foundation. But one thing I've started realizing over the past 2 internships, especially, is that I think I'm more interested in like kind of higher level thinking rather than like technical thinking. I don't know. I'm more interested in like corporate strategy than I am in solving technical questions. Like instead of thinking like how can we make this algorithm more efficient, I like thinking about why do we want to enter this market? How can we serve the needs of these customers better? What decisions do we have to make as a business to operate there? And so I'm pretty interested in consulting as a field, like management consulting. So like MBB, like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, all the companies I'm applying to. I'm also interested in product management. But basically, like I think I've had a lot of good technical experience, and I want to get more into like the business side, and, like management side of things, which is hard to do, especially as a young person. And so, yeah, looking for roles on that sort of thing. I want to be in tech long term, and I think it's a good goal. Like it's a great field to be in. It suits my personality in a lot of ways because I don't have like a shit ton of respect for authority. Those personality tests that people do, and like they have like the graph or whatever. It's always like a V shape for respect for authority. Not that I don't respect authority, but I think it's like I hate really like flat, like strict hierarchies. Like I like that tech has a flat hierarchy, and they accept ideas from everyone. And like if your idea is smart, they accept it. Things like that. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in staying in the tech world, but I think probably more on like the management or like business side of things. I hope that answers the question. Next question from Melissa. Do you ask for your own pay or do they set it? Like what's the minimum starting pay for a first year minimum wage? It really depends on what industry you're going to. So like for research, I think it's always minimum wage, to be honest. I never heard of researchers getting like $30 an hour. I like made like $11. Sorry, Sorry, anyways, I'm back. Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, it really depends on the job you're going for. You don't set your own pay. If you could set your own pay, I'm pretty sure no one would set like a low pay. But it is negotiable at certain companies. I will preface it with that. Normal starting pay for a first year, it depends on the industry, and for research, it's like minimum wage. For tech, it's like $20 to $25 an hour. And it's kind of scales up from there. With the more experience you have, it gets higher. If you want, I can tell you more on pay. But really, I encourage people to like think of, what kinds of like tasks they want to work on and like what kinds of goals they want to get in an internship rather than pay. And I'm a good example of that because I've rejected jobs with higher pay for things that more closely align with what I want to do. And internship pay is obviously insignificant compared to full-time pay. So Yeah. Any other questions? We still have like 21 people. Pretty cool. Or I guess that includes us. But feel free to take yourself off mute too. You know, I know it sounds like a lot of pressure, but you don't bite.
I don't know if people have more questions. I mean, if it's also that sometimes it's hard to think of questions on the spot.
For sure.
So there's definitely that's why he's connected all of his platforms there.
Yeah, so feel free to message me later on, or listen to my podcast if you want. Haha, shameless plug. Or follow me on IG or something like that. Actually, should I even be plugging my IG? I feel like it's kind of weird thing to do. But anyways, reach out if you have questions. I'm pretty friendly, and I will get to them as soon as I can. I don't have like a super free schedule right now, but I'm also not like super busy, so I'll try and get back to them as soon as I can. And yeah, thanks for attending the talk. I'm not ending it, to be clear. If you have other questions, feel free. I'll stay on for like 5 more minutes. But thanks for attending the talk. It was really fun. Have never done something like this, so that's cool. And honestly, you guys are all like super the right track already just by thinking about these things in high school. Like, I'll be honest, like I was pretty not thinking about my future when I was in high school that much until I got into like grade 11 and 12. So for anyone who's like grade 9, 10, 11 here, like you're way ahead of where I was. And like, I think it's just a matter of like, keeping your priorities straight, focusing, and you'll definitely get what you want to get out of like your career in university. So yeah.
Thank you so much. No,
Good.
you had a really good presentation. I think everyone really took away a lot from it, and I'm glad that it was something like you haven't done or something out of your comfort zone. You did a really good job. Just to
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
we'll stay on for like 4 more minutes, and then if anyone has a question, or you can feel free to drop off too.
Yeah, I'll probably message you later about the Master Forge. I just found out about that today, and I was interested.
The Forge is cool. They also have I think deadlines just passed, but they have a biomedical commercialization program where you can apply to be part of this program, and they have like lectures and things like that. And it's basically like on entrepreneurship no worries, Jasmine, on entrepreneurship in like the biotech world. Unfortunately, the deadline just passed, but reach out. You're in Hellside, right? So reach out to the faculty because they have a lot of connections on the Forge and stuff like that too. So, no problem, also.
Thank you guys for
Feel
coming.
free to connect.
Make sure to keep following us. We have one more workshop happening next week, which we'll announce soon. It'll be our last.
Ooh, exciting! Do you get a sneak peek of it, or is it still secret?
Chelsea and Giselle, do we wanna? I guess we could start.
It's okay. We can keep it secret.
We'll have it.
I think we can say it.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Chelsea, you want to do it?
Oh,
yeah.
It's on how to build an impactful product or project.
So it'll talk a little bit more about ethics and just using that. It kind of like ties the whole series together. It's like, okay, yeah, you have all these ideas now, but there's a lot more to consider, the bigger picture. Yeah.
For sure.
So that'll be
our
final.
That's awesome.
Yeah.